Welcome to lesson 1. So to work through the following lessons on measuring crime, you're going to need to have your booklet 3, which is your measuring crime and deviance booklet, ready, and you'll need to work through the contents of the booklet as we go through the recorded lesson information. So if you have a look in your booklets on page 4, you'll see the topic content and your objectives for this section of crime and deviance. The lessons are going to work through how we measure crime and then have a look at some of the very specific aspects of measuring and tracking crime and deviance over time. So they're the official statistics, which is a helpful recap on your research methods as well, victim surveys and self-report studies, and we're also going to look at some of the statistical trends in crime and deviance in the UK. So that includes the types of crime, the victims of crime and different types of offender and offender characteristics. If you have a look at page 5 in your booklets, there are a number of extension tasks that you can have a look at with regards to crime and deviance. Some of these are related to the process of measuring crime, but there are also some wider documentaries and films that are relevant to crime and deviance overall. So if you have a look in your booklets on page 6, you've got an extract there that just tracks crime since 1901. So one of the important reasons why statisticians measure crime and deviance is to track the changes in crime and how that changes over time. As you can see from the chart there in front of you, there has been a rapid increase in crime and deviance over the century. This is not just down to there being more criminals, but there are a lot of complicated processes behind what constitutes crime and what gets reported and recorded and how effective that actually is in terms of measuring crime as a social issue. So if you can pause the video for a second and have a read through the information on page 6. When you're done, restart the video and we'll have a look at the information on page 7. Okay, at the top of page 7, you've got a space to write down the key features of each of the sources of crime statistics. If you want to pause the video now and make a note of those and then restart, and we'll go through each one. So there are different sources that contribute to the measurements of crime, and they all show a slightly different picture of crime and deviance in the UK. Police recorded crime are offences that are detected by or reported to the police, but they're also required to report and record these crimes, and not all crimes that take place will be recorded by the police. Victim surveys include what we call the British Crime Survey. This is a survey that goes out to the population in general to see if they have been a victim of crime. The difference to victim surveys and police recorded crime is that victim surveys allow you to report crimes that you haven't or couldn't report to the police for various reasons. So victim surveys do include unreported and unrecorded crimes, and as a result you get a more accurate picture than what the police have actually recorded, because they're not affected by the likelihood of prosecution, the likelihood of finding an offender, issues around police time and so on. Self-report studies are slightly different, so these generally come from the Home Office Offending Crime and Justice Survey, but they are anonymous questionnaires in which people are asked if they have been a criminal. So have they committed a crime? Regardless of whether or not they've been discovered, they're asked to disclose if they have committed any kind of offence and what sort of offence that was. Obviously there are issues with self-report studies in that those people who have committed very serious crimes are highly unlikely to report that they have committed a crime, regardless of whether or not it says it's anonymous. And then the last source for measuring crime is court, prison and police records. Now, court and prison records are slightly different. The court records, which we'll look at later, are a record of how many cases have been brought to either a magistrate or a Crown Court. It's not necessarily based on conviction, because obviously a lot of cases that come to court don't actually get convicted. So the court cases are what is currently being prosecuted, and it's more a reflection of what the Crown Prosecution Service choose to prosecute or not. Prison records obviously only reflect very serious crimes in the UK. It's very serious crimes where the offender is sent to prison and has a custodial sentence. Therefore, it tends to reflect sort of the worst end of crime, the more serious crimes, rape, murder, assault, and so on. What they are useful for is revealing the characteristics of the people who have been caught. Now, that's not necessarily the most common criminals, but the people who have been caught, charged and prosecuted. So it does give an indication of not only who gets caught, but also sort of the nature of the offenders that are targeted by the police as well. So when we look at prison statistics, it's quite evident that there is a very specific characteristic of those who are arrested, charged, prosecuted and given a custodial sentence. Okay, so if you read the information at the bottom of page 7, this highlights the two main ways in Britain that we record crime. Crime is recorded quite differently across the globe, so this is a focus really on Britain and the UK. A lot of the data comes from England and Wales, with the devolved governments of Northern Ireland and Scotland having their own measures and processes for prosecuting offenders. So the main sources of crime data for Britain: the official crime statistics, which are from police recorded crime. So this is everything that the police have made a note of, whether they have decided to caution, charge and prosecute or not. It's everything that's been recorded by the police authorities across the UK. The second is the crime survey for England and Wales, which was previously known as the British Crime Survey. And this is interviews with a sample of adults, looking at victimology, whether they've been a victim of crime and so on. The link here to methods is quite important. If you think about your sampling techniques and issues of generalisability, although they do try and get a representative sample across ages, genders, ethnicities and so on, there is always that issue when it comes to sampling a population, in that if you are trying to generalise to the whole population, one of the problems is you need a sample that represents the whole of that population. The best way to do that is obviously to survey the whole population, which doesn't actually take place. It is only a small sample that is taken, and therefore it's not necessarily inclusive of every different type of individual in society. The official picture that comes out of statistics gives us an idea of the volume of crime, so how much crime is taking place, and also the trends in crime. So that's things like what types of crime are taking place. Is there a rise in knife crime? Is there a rise in theft, burglary, robbery? And that can be useful to sociologists because we can tie that in to other socio-economic situations in the country. The statistics that come from court records and police cautioning attempt to give a picture of who is responsible for these criminal offences, and give this sort of picture of the criminal, so to speak. We will look at those in more detail because there are obvious problems. If you have heard of stop and search issues, if you haven't, have a look into that. There are a couple of videos on Teams. But things like stop and search tend to target a very specific part of the population, and as a result, you are more likely to have arrests and cautioning as a result, whilst other members of the population are walking free and not stopped and searched to the same extent. So whilst it does attempt to give a picture of the criminal, that is a socially constructed picture of the criminal, and it's not always accurate in that sense. So the main purposes of actually gathering all the statistical data and information about the picture of crime is that this is used for a number of different reasons in terms of both sociology and wider social agencies, so things like the police, the courts, and so on. So it allows you to make direct comparisons with previous years and look at those different trends, particularly what types of crime are on the increase, what types of crime are on the decrease, and as a result, that helps you look at what the social issues may be behind the types of crime. It helps look at the police clear-up rate. This is used to measure police efficiency. It helps with social policies that are put in place to improve, to increase police on the streets, for example, if there is an increase in street crime. And it helps recognise good practice as well. So if there is a police force that has a very high clear-up rate, it may be that that is targeted by other forces and the government and things like that, and used to support police forces where the clear-up rate is slightly less. It also helps the police show where they should concentrate particular resources. So hotspot areas that are causing the most public unrest, which quite commonly is attributed to youth crime, gangs, and antisocial behaviours. It allows the police to see what types of crime are on the increase. For example, if it's vandalism, they may have a concentration of police on the beat walking around areas with high vandalism. If it's stolen cars and an increase in joyriding, it may be that they target households, giving them information about making sure that the cars are locked up at night and things like that. So it allows society to sort of respond to where those elements of crime and deviance are coming from. It also provides information to the general public on crime patterns. It gives them allegedly informed judgments and information so that they can decide what is a problem in their area, what they may or may not need to do for personal safety, whether or not they believe that government and police forces are working in their best interests. You may have heard on the radio, I know Andy Burnham is doing a monthly report your concerns about crime in Manchester, so that the police can target what is concerning to the public. Now, what concerns the public is what is published in the news media. So again, there are issues of whether that is a true reflection of crime or not. There are also cases where the public will be demanding, you've done moral panic, so demanding a response to things like knife crime and gangs, without fully kind of understanding whether or not that is actually the biggest problem of crime and deviance in their particular area. If you do want to know what the crime patterns are for your very specific area, you can go on the police website, put your postcode in, and it tells you what types of crime and how many crimes have taken place in the area that you live. In terms of sociology, measuring crime and crime statistics help us explain some elements of crime. Sociologists tend to pick apart what is and what is not shown in official statistics. So it allows sociologists to sort of question what is going on about hidden crimes, domestic abuse, domestic violence and rape are quite commonly considered to be the dark figure of crime, hidden crimes that people are afraid to report, unable to report for their own safety, and therefore whether or not there is sufficient support, police intervention, things like that around those kinds of crimes that are hidden, and whether they should be targeted. And the official statistics also do reveal the police assumptions and stereotyping, and this goes back to what I said before about things like stop and search process, the kinds of areas that the police target and focus on. So statistics are generally created by the activities of the police themselves. So if you've got 20 police cruising around a deprived area, those 20 police are going to find more, I don't know, drunken, disorderly behaviours because they are physically in that space. If they are not cruising around a nice middle class area, they're not going to spot the drunken, disorderly behaviours in that particular area. And it may well be that there are identical levels in both cases, but the police just are not physically there to actually arrest, to record, to report, to caution, and so on. So it does help you see what it is the police target and where and who are being targeted in terms of police concerns. Okay, so the first major measure that we're going to have a look at is official statistics. So if you can turn to page 8 in your booklets, and we'll have a look at how official statistics are gathered and recorded. So one of the main concerns that sociologists would have with official statistics is the fact that quite often the general public and the government and the police report these official statistics as if they are a factual representation with no issues, no problems, no sort of concerns about where they come from and how they were developed. And a sociologist would look at official statistics and actually consider them as far less simplistic than it is made out to be. They look at official statistics as a social construction, and that comes from the idea that they are a result of things like the police, where they need to target particular crimes, activities, behaviours. They can be a result of moral panic, if you think of the Mods and Rockers and Stanley Cohen's research back in youth subculture. They can be a response to social interactions between people, how somebody has interpreted a particular behaviour, and also who feels they are able to officially report and prosecute a particular type of behaviour as a criminal offence. From things like Marxist perspectives, they exclude corporate crime. A lot of corporate crimes are prosecuted by HMRC, for example, if it's tax evasion, health and safety executive, if it's an accident at work and things like that. So there are a number of types of crime that are simply not included in official statistics. So therefore, it gives us some idea about some aspects of crime, but certainly doesn't give us an idea of every aspect of crime, and they shouldn't be approached with the notion that they are not biased and that they are not subjective. They may be sold as objective quantitative data, but they are by far the least objective statistical data that is gathered. If you have a look at the information from Holdaway, so one of the things that the police will do when you phone through to a police service is they will decide at that point whether the incident that you're reporting is, first of all, a crime, and second of all, worth their time to investigate. A good example might be that a child's bike has been stolen from outside the house. This is a crime that the police are highly unlikely to find the offender, highly unlikely to find the bike, would take an awful lot of paperwork, and so they tend not to encourage the owners to sort of follow it through, have it as a recorded crime, because it would go as an unresolved crime. So there is a lot of decision making prior to the police even beginning an investigation or recording a particular incident that can have a high impact on crime statistics. So the main agencies of formal social control are also responsible for reporting official statistics. So first of all, bottom of page 8, we'll have a look at the police. Now the police are obviously responsible for filtering information from the public and deciding what is important to them, what they feel they can actually be successful with, and therefore deciding what to record. If you have a look at the information on page 8, it breaks that down into sort of 5 different aspects. So you've got the seriousness of the offence, the social status of the person reporting the offence, classifying the crime, whether the police put it into a particular category of a type of offence or not, police discretion. At the end of the day, most offences are not actually discovered by the police. It's usually reported to them. And then promotion relationships at work. Ultimately, if you are very, very good at solving particular crimes, you will get promoted, have respect at work, and therefore you may choose to take on or not take on particular reported crimes in that sense. If you can just read through the information on those 5 aspects on page 8 and then unpause the video and we'll go through the courts and the government. So the courts record official statistics. These again reflect social processes because the police have to have investigated the crime and arrested the offender for it to even get to court. So you've got a limitation on the number of cases that actually get there. The second aspect of this is that actually only very, very serious crimes tend to go to court: drugs, murder, assault, and so on. And without having a wider picture of sort of the smaller aspects of crime, which tend to be things like shoplifting and stuff like that, court statistics give a very specific picture of sort of the very serious elements of crime. The government ultimately decides what is a crime and maintains the law, processes the law in response to socioeconomic changes, cultural changes, the influence of powerful groups and things like that. So what happens is, as the government shifts and changes various legal aspects, things come in and out of legality. So a good example is homosexuality. This was a crime and then it was decriminalised. Therefore, all of a sudden that particular crime just ended and it no longer featured in statistics. So being able to change what constitutes crimes, allows the government to some extent to manipulate statistics. Another example is drug classifications. So if you classify up or down particular drugs, and cannabis has fallen into that bracket, it will mean that there are less court cases for possession of cannabis, for example. If it drops down classifications, that people tend to be cautioned, and therefore it makes the drugs picture look very different in society. So the final issue when it comes to the official statistics is the unrecorded crime that we talked about. So official statistics come from the police, the criminal justice agencies, but unfortunately if you don't report a crime, it cannot be recorded. So there are some common issues when it comes to crime reporting, and the three main things that need to have been in place is, first of all, it needs to have come to someone's attention that a crime has actually taken place. Now, this might seem quite obvious with things like assault or burglary. However, it is not that obvious when it comes to things like air pollution or children who are in domestically violent situations may not understand that that's the situation that they're in. Businesses where there is shoplifting and they haven't noticed something being stolen, again, won't have come to someone's attention. So although it sounds quite obvious that it needs to come to someone's attention, it's not always the case that crimes are actually really obvious. If it has come to your attention, you must report it to the relevant agency. Now, for most of the general public, this is the police, but people don't always report crimes. Say you're a small shop owner and a child's, or an adult, I suppose, but somebody has stolen, I don't know, a Mars bar. You're highly unlikely to contact the police to report the theft of a chocolate bar worth, don't know, I've not bought a Mars bar for ages, but 60p or whatever it is. So not all crimes get reported, and again, there are a wide range of hidden crimes and the darker crimes that people cannot report out of fear or shame. And the last thing that then needs to happen is that the agency, such as the police, need to accept that the law has been broken. Now, one of the sort of largest examples of this is around domestic violence. It has long been the case that the majority of domestic violence incidents were not taken seriously by the police. There were a number of major cases, and the laws changed throughout the 90s and right through to recently, where domestic violence has been changed to include coercion and power. But it is very, very difficult for someone to express, in particular, coercion and power in order to make a case. And it may be that the police don't see something as a domestic abuse situation. A common one that is not usually prosecuted is violence from children towards adults, so kids towards their parents. If the parents report it at all, it's highly unlikely in a lot of cases that the police would tend to follow up on that. And ultimately, there is a common misconception that domestic violence is just between two adults, and it's not. It can be between any person over 16, and there is a misconception that when it comes to children over 16 in the home, it would be the parent who would be abusive, not the child. So it becomes very difficult, and whether the police actually decide that a law has been broken sufficiently for them to be involved in would determine whether or not they actually investigated in the first place. So that kind of gives you an overview of why there is such a high level of unrecorded crime. So on the following slide, you're going to have a video of the dark figure of crime and deviance. Now, there's not much space at the bottom of page 9, sorry. So I don't know if you want to add a piece of paper in here and just make some additional notes. It's only about 3.5 minutes, so it's only a short video, but there's some useful ideas in there about why there is a dark figure of crime and how that comes about.
The media love telling us about crime, especially rising crime. But are the crime statistics what they seem? How does a crime become a crime statistic? We have to remember that statistics are social constructions involving social processes, negotiation and decision-making. First, for a crime to be recorded, the police have to know about it. Imagine these are all the crimes actually committed in your town in a year. There may be very good reasons why many of them will not be reported.
I realised I was date raped. I didn't go to the police. Because you hear such stories in the media, don't you, about people, the women in court are just not believed, that their lives are depicted bit by bit, and it's always the man who looks a better person, and that's why I didn't go to the police.
Yeah, we were out in town this Friday, and I had some drugs to sell, and this guy had his money out, but then he called his mate over, and his mates came, and then was getting my head kicked in. So, well, that messed things up, because the guy had gone down here with the stuff, and I can't do anything about it. I can't call the coppers and be like, oh yeah, I was selling some drugs, and then they came and beat me up. So, I was pretty stuck then.
It was pretty hard. I was beaten up quite badly on a daily basis, and for anything that I did wrong. So like say once I was washing up and I smashed a glass and I was locked in a cupboard for like 2 days. I didn't go to school, but I was only little, so I didn't know anything was wrong. So no one tells you to go to the police or social services or Childline. You just don't know.
So the number of crimes reported to the police is much smaller than the actual number. But that's not the end of the story. Sometimes reported crimes are not recorded.
Right, I shared a flat with these 4 girls, right? And one of them, oh my God, she's just horrible. And she's been having all these fights with all these other girls. And one night, the other night, right, she came into my room with a knife. Right, with a knife, right? Just waving it about because I had used up the milk. I was just like, oh, and I rang the police. What did they do? What did they do? Nothing, right? Nothing. They said, go to college because it's a domestic. I was like, what? Right, the college helped me more than they did.
Right, I come home one evening, and I know this is going to sound a little strange, but I looked in my garden and my plants weren't there. Now, I contacted the police, but they were reluctant to help, really. Now, I suspect it's been my neighbours, but, you know, you can't be sure. All the police said was, are you sure? You know, there's no sign of forced entry or anything. At the end of the day, all they were really interested in was convincing me to not take it any further.
So there's a number of reasons why many crimes never become crime statistics, and this unknown number is called the dark figure. So what do you think understanding the social construction of crime statistics tells us about media stories that crime's gone up or down? And how do you think we can try to get more accurate measures of crime?
Okay, so the last thing you need to do is have a look on page 10 at the evaluations around official statistics. So in summary, they're drawn from the records kept by the police and the courts and other agencies. They are useful in tracking data over time, although they should not be considered an objective measure of actual crime and deviant behaviour. What they do give us an accurate view of is the way that the criminal justice system works. All right, so how the police are working, what the police are targeting, who the police are arresting, how court trials go, and the nature of punishments that are being distributed to offenders. So if you can have a look at the information on page 10, read through those evaluations, highlight the key points, and then unpause the video for the final bit. Okay, so that brings you to the end of the first section on official statistics. In summary, for the remainder of this lesson, so you've got about 15 minutes left, I would think. Can you read through the information fact sheet on crime statistics? So this gives you an overview of the different types of statistics, some of the issues with official statistics. It expands on the detail that we've gone through. Read through this and make a summary sheet. So please make a detailed summary sheet. These are all useful processes to build into your understanding of official statistics. As you're going through this, have a think as well about your research methods. Ideas of things like positivism versus interpretivism, quantitative versus qualitative data, subjectivity and objectivity. Try and build in some of those ideas about how you would evaluate the concept of statistics, so a numerical measure of something as complicated as crime and deviance. So you can add that in to your summary sheet. The crime statistics handout can be found on Teams. I will set it up as an assignment task. So you can upload a photograph of your summary information. It's also in the crime and deviance files section. It's homework 19 crime statistics, I think it's called. But I will set it up as an assignment task on Teams, and you can submit the summary sheet, please, and I'll have a look through that and send you some feedback. If you've got any questions on the content of this lesson, please drop me an email or make a note and ask me, or put a note up in the crime and deviance section of the chat on Teams, and we can have a look through those.